Hello lovelies, and welcome to this week's makeup tutorial. Today's going to be a little bit special because we're going to do a little bit more of an in-depth kind of tutorial. So really great for someone who hasn't had a lot of experience with brushes. So we're going to really dive into the tools of the trade. Come and stay along, and if you're interested in finding out how I utilize my brushes and what the difference between the different sorts can sometimes be. Okay, I'm so glad you came along and clicked on this video so we can really get into what I absolutely love most, and that is the tools. Things that make the looks, the results, the effortlessness of it all so much easier. If you don't have the right tools, it doesn't make it look impossible, it just makes it a little bit more challenging. So having the right brushes just means that, just like any artist, you're going to have an easier time getting to where you want to get. So I've got a nice mirror here, you can see the little reflection, so I can see exactly what I'm doing as I'm telling you all about it. So where I like to start my routine is with my homemade moisturizer. This is a beautiful blend of two extremely wonderful products that smell divine. So as you can see, I'm using a paw foot applicator there. You can use this for liquid foundation, you can use this for just about any kind of big area application of a liquid. And I usually use just about this much to do half of the face, usually underneath, and then another dollop this size for the rest of the face. The reason I'm not using my hands or a sponge or anything like that, hands I don't like to dive into there because it can contaminate the jar. And this also just kind of spreads the product really evenly, allows the skin to really drink it up, and it just feels really nice on. And I know that I can always just give it a good wash afterwards and it'll be clean and sanitary again to use on the next day. The other wonderful thing is it's really good at spreading the product out, so I don't get clumps of product anywhere, as you wouldn't if you used it for foundation, if you're into liquid foundation. And if I needed more in a certain area, I can most certainly do that. The applicator really does allow me to sort of concentrate product in different areas if I so choose. So now that my skin's really beautifully moisturized, my next step of my routine is a bit of sun cream. This I will use my fingers for. So I'm going to put the tiniest little amount because it's plenty. Now normally what I would do is after I apply my moisturizer, I would probably walk away and then come back to do the sun cream, and sometimes I do the sun cream, walk away, do the moisturizer, just whatever I feel like on the day. Either way seems to work. So I'm just going to spread it onto the ring fingers and just dab it on. As you can see, when using your fingers, not only does it get your fingers a little bit oily, which in this case it's fine, it's sunscreen, but it also kind of concentrates and blotches the product on. So what I then do is go back with the same brush I just used and spread it everywhere. Now, if a little bit of sunscreen, this particular sunscreen, gets into my moisturizer, I really don't mind. It's such a beautiful product and it's just as natural as the moisturizing product. If I knew that it would stay stable and active if I mix the two, I would just pre-mix it, but I have no way to prove that the zinc oxide in this will be just as active with all the oils that I've added here. The oils that are in this, obviously the company has already tested and decided that's a good idea. I can't guarantee my SPF level with what I'm doing, so I've chosen to keep it separate. And like I said before, I'll even separate when I put them on by about 5-10 minutes. You know, go away, brush your teeth, come back, or, you know, part of the morning routine. Next is my really beautiful, it's a Kabuki brush, but it's flat. I do have a regular Kabuki brush that I will use if I want to use a lot less coverage in my makeup. But this one's really good because look how concentrated these little bristles are. They're just so nicely dense and packed right in there. The shape of the brush is really convenient because I can contour as I go, which is really convenient for time saving. And what I really love about this brush is it's super easy to clean, just using a little silicone pad to rub it on, and it seems to get most of the product out with very little effort. So what I'll do is I'll take one dip like this of the foundation, so that's quite a bit. This is going to be my concealer, my foundation, and hopefully there'll still be a little bit left that we can add for contour. And it's all going to happen with this one brush. So I get as much product off as I can. Now the first dip is always going to have a lot of product, so I'm going to use it as my concealer. So we're stamping it on anywhere we want a lot of coverage, and then we're going to go back in with a bit of a lighter coverage of the brush and then work it in as a general foundation. Another dip for the other side. And third, and usually last but not always last, dip to cover those concealed areas, whether you want to use them for brightening and lightening or more coverage. So this is actually going to do both, because I like to get a lot of coverage on the second chin, on the underjaw, and a lot of coverage under the eye because I don't want it to crack throughout the day. This is a really good mineral loose powder foundation, so it tends to sink into the skin quite nicely without blocking pores, and I find that that means that the coverage is going to be really good and long lasting, but we're going to do an extra layer anyway. Way too much for the contours. I'm going to try and get some of it out. So I probably have this much left. Tap it back out into the lid, and we're going to add our beautiful contouring product, which is the Multitasker. I'm going to use an eyebrow brush, which is like this, and I'm just going to tap a little bit off into the lid, so just that little black line that you see. I'm going to use this Kabuki brush to dip back in and kind of mix, tap and mix. Okay, and then you can sort of see that the colour changes a little bit on the brush. I'm going to go in and contour. The best thing about applying these powders straight after the moisturizer is that the skin is still a little bit tacky, so together they kind of merge and sink right in. So if you wanted it to be a higher coverage product, you just got to have a bit more moisture for it to stick to. I wouldn't necessarily recommend letting it be too tacky, because then it can ball, but just kind of moist to the touch. And you get really good coverage when you do it that way. So that's my beautiful Kabuki Multitasker. You can't have a proper Kabuki. You can have a Kabuki like this, you can have a bigger version of this, they will all do the job. What I love about this is the control you get in all the crevices and things like that. And your result ends up being quite light and quite minimal, and you can always build and build and build as well if you wanted more colour or more depth to your colour. So you saw the eyebrow brush already. It's already got a little bit of product on it, but I'll add a tiny bit more. This is the absolutely perfect shape brush for eyebrows. It's also really good for winged liner if you wanted to apply that using a powder-based product or a pot set product instead of something with a applicator already in the tube. This is amazing, and I'll show you why. We're going to use it this way to draw in the shape of the brow, like so, and then this way, so this way, to go with all the little hairs, and it also, at the same time, blends in the harsh lines we just applied. And there's a brow. Two brows. So that's all done. Next I want to go on to one of my favorite brushes in the whole world, and it's this tiny, look at it next to my fingernail, it's really, really small, little crease brush. It's so, so puny. If a crease brush can be all the way up to that size, then we're looking at a really puny one. So I might go through all my small brushes first and show you what they do. So let's just take some eyeshadow. Doesn't matter really what color or anything. So just a bit of glittery, nice deep color. This is from the Ether Beauty palette just because it's still out from before. This is the color Protection. It's a nice deep shimmery color, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place it. See that? Right in the crease. So much control because it's tiny, and it's got that perfectly rounded head, a little bit tapered even, which means that the dots or the blots aren't going to go on sort of harsh stamps. They're going to already naturally start to blend just because of the shape of the brush, and the concentration allows me to pack on quite a bit of product. Then with the same brush, without having to dip in with another one, I just blend it out. Same sort of idea, you've got this beautiful concentrated tapered rounded brush, and you can just work it around the lid to create your shape, and it'll effortlessly create a very blended, very soft look without making you lose all your pigment because it's just so concentrated. Now it's just one dip. Now let's compare it to the big one, which is just another thing, but it's just fluffier and still tapered, just a little bit fluffier in nature because it is bigger, and it's also not quite as dense because the brushes are longer. So if I chop them down, they'd be dense. Because there's so many, they kind of V out to the top, if you like. So I'm going to dip into that same color. We're going to use this on the other eye, and I'll show you what that does. So tapping on. So straight away you get this dispersion and then blending out. So in this instance you get a lot more diffusion, and you don't get quite as neat of a shape. So in this instance I would actually have to go back with some misting spray or something, a flat brush, and just clean it up because it's just too diffuse for the kind of sharpness I like to have in my looks. These brushes definitely have a place, but if you really wanted to concentrate your product like we have on this arch, then you know, this is the kind of product you want to go in afterwards clean and just diffuse it out a little rather than having a diffuse application to begin with. So seeing as I mentioned it, we'll go over to my other most used brush. It's a very dense, very flat, kind of like that first brush we saw, the paddle brush, just a very tiny version. This is really great for when you want to put on a lot of product on a very flat area and just swipe it out rather than having to blend. So let's put a dark color just so we can see what's going on. So place and swipe. If I did that with this type of brush, just to show you, it's going to be a little bit diffuse still, a little bit hard to control in a flat area, and a little bit kind of blended straight away. So concentrated, flat, controlled, kind of blended. So I just stepped away for a moment to fix it up to make it even again. So literally going in and repeating the steps to make both eyes the same. Next I'm going to show you a fluffy flat brush. So we did the concentrated flat brush, now a fluffy flat brush. There's two types of these. There's one that's kind of more V'd out and the one that are more tapered in. What I really love about the ones that are a little bit sort of V'd inwards and they're not as sort of three-dimensional, a bit more flat, is you can really get into corners with them and create really beautiful shapes. So with something like this, getting a really dark color, for example, I would love to use it for, just as one example, building up the outer V. You get the same kind of control that you have with this dense one, but it automatically starts blending at the V, at the kind of tapered, fluffed out edges. But it does it in a very particular shape, so you still have a lot of control as you do with this flat brush. But with this kind of flat brush, because it's a little bit less two-dimensional, I'll just show you on the other eye. You still can do the shape and everything, but again, as the same as the first example, it's really good for diffusing things out or blending things out. Doesn't really pack product on at all, so I've got to kind of swoosh it. And if you swoosh long enough, you do get the same as the first result, but this is automatically smoky and really moody and built up, whereas this one's a little bit more translucent and kind of blended in, and it's really hard to tell where the brown we first put down starts and this one ends, and it's a lot more of a blended look. Really great if you want to smoke two similar colors together for dimension, for example, but if you want to create a bit of contrast like we have here, it's a little bit harder to achieve. I'm a really practical person. I could probably use one brush to achieve any kind of look. It just takes so much more work. So even if I sat there reapplying, swooshing, it's just a lot easier for me to grab something like this or something like this, where I can really build up the product, dip one more time, and just match it. And what's more is, that was really quick as you saw, what's more is I now have to go back in with that first product and regain that edge, because I lost it. So they're still similar, but they'll need a little bit of fixing to be equal at the very end. Another really cute brush that I think that we all need to have at least one of is something like this. It's so thin and small. It's kind of the same size as this one. Look how much skinnier it is. It barely has a third dimension. This one's perfectly round. This one's flat. Really great, especially if you want to dip it into some setting spray and get some beautiful artwork happening, or if you're going to do a cut crease look where you've got to really build up a small area full of color, or if you just wanted to build up a lot of color in a small space without any kind of artistry or trickery there. So what we might do, I'll borrow a Royal Winter color, get another palette out. Okay, I'm going to use some misting spray, not for the brush, but for the palette, because I feel like it needs it. So very, very light dampening. And we're going to go into the color Grace, which is a beautiful pinky white color. Look already at how much pigment I've picked up, how much product I've picked up, because the space is so tiny. What I'm going to do is, same as I did with that first flat brush that we used, it's just a sweeping motion, but look at the payoff we get. Wow, right? Any kind of flat brush will kind of give us that, but what that achieved was really concentrating the space we're working in, as compared to, say, something like this. Still flat, by the way, still damp, picks up a lot less product, and that's the kind of difference you get in the result. Then you've got this kind of brush, so it's very similar to some of the other ones we were using, still kind of a contouring brush, and you can use it for a very diffuse contour if you want, or if you had too much product somewhere, just to kind of diffuse it out, rub it out, that sort of thing. But that's not what we want to use it for. To me, this is a detailed face brush, and the name says it all. It's for any kind of facial detail. You can use it for contouring if you could command a brush so specifically. You can use it, as I said, to diffuse the look. What I love using it for is highlighter. So I'm going to go back into that Grace color. See how it still picks up a good amount of product, but because of its tapering and its kind of shape, watch how it applies it. So great at really spreading it out without losing any of that pigment. It's also really convenient for collecting any fallout in the pan. So a bit of a favourite, that one. Also really good for facial contour if you needed it. If you didn't like to use something that's going to be so diffuse, if you like your contour to be really defined. Or if you wanted to fix up a little bit of a brow with a bit of highlight, that sort of thing. So anyway, we need a concentrated product looking very diffused. Now the next brush is kind of an extra. You don't have to have something like this, and it doesn't really serve too much extra benefit. In fact, there's two of them that I'll show you. These are really fluffy, really just fluffy. That's the best way to describe it. They're still a little bit dense. See how they don't really bend under the pressure of my finger? But they're just fluffy. So if you wanted to get a really lovely, diffuse, kind of barely there kind of thing, for example, you wanted to apply a neutral color first to then blend out with, or you needed to blend out something, or not even blend out, blend with. It's a really good mixing brush, this one, and it's got a really good angle to it. So it's kind of like one of those first ones we talked about. This one's flat, or flatter, but it just gives you a little bit more shape control. So this one obviously has more of a sharp edge, albeit a blended edge, and this one's a bit more contoured, again, although it's fluffy. So the eye looks almost complete. I feel like my crease needs help. I feel like my eyelid and my kind of brow bone are not really defined, and that's going to go back to this beauty here. I don't feel like any of the other brushes are going to quite do it justice as much as this one. But because I spoke of it, I'm going to show you how this flat one can do the job too. So I'm going to go into a nice dark color. I'm going to place this first flat end right where I want the color to stop, and light sweeping motions back and forth to create the shape. Very wispy. Versus doing the same thing with this. There you go. And this is what I was talking about. This gives me that definition I'm after. I can blend it out as much as I like, or as little as I like afterwards. I don't lose any of that beautiful beige that I started with. This one, the beige is still there, but you've got to work to see it, so it has to catch the light. The application was a lot more broad and diffuse, even though I was very careful. And you still get that definition, but it's more of a smoky, kind of moody look rather than having just that defined lid versus brow. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with this one and make this the same as that. So that's pretty much the eye brushes done. I'm going to use something like this because I just love the way it gives me a bit of smoke, but I still have a lot of control for the under eye. Just creating that little outer V that I like to do. Really completing the look. And we're going to have to fix a little bit of things out off camera just to make the eyes even again, but that's okay. They're almost there anyway, because I've been trying to fix it as I go a little as well. The obvious thing is the bronzer's missing. I love this brush for bronzer. It's kind of just a big detailed face brush or a small blush brush. Okay, it just gets into the nooks and crannies the perfect amount and diffuses the perfect amount. So I take a very little bit of product, even though I love my bronzer, I only use a tiny amount, and I put the brush, the edges, exactly where I want it to be, and then just circles. So really marrying up the beautiful highlight, which you can do afterwards, and contour. Then warming up the frame of the face until you're running out of product. Then dip it in again and repeat on the other side. Okay, that is pretty much what I have to show you guys. I do love to use just a small, flat, sort of very soft brush for my lip colors. It just pays off product beautifully and feels nice. When it goes on, it gives me a lot of control, so I can do liner, I can do lip color, all with the one brush. I can even apply it like lipstick. And it really traps a lot of product in, so a little goes a really long way. There we go, just with a tiny little dip, and that's it. So obviously mascara and eyeliner and things like that still need to happen for the look to be complete, but I really wanted to take a step back and show you every single choice that I make with my brushes. It's not incidental and it's not on the fly. I do now know my products really well, and I've got a bajillion brushes. I've sort of collected so many over the years, and they do all have their time to shine, but I wanted to show you the ones that are similar-ish to one another. So I've just picked one out of a family, if you like, just to show what my choices are based on. And I hope this really helped, because I think that brushes are a mystery. They all kind of look the same until you've had a really good experiment, and I have done that. So hopefully I've saved you guys a few steps, and you now know which brush to reach for the desired effect. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me. I love, love, love having you here. Please do check out some more looks on Instagram. Stay to the end to see the finished look. And if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe. It's really great to see who comes along, and even leave me a comment. That's another way to let me know that you've come to say hi. Wherever you are around the world, lovelies, I hope you're having an amazing day. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.